Yeah.
Yeah, usually it's the front teeth, but
Right, but
yeah.
I mean, like I'm sorry, it's hyperbole.
Yeah. Accidents happen. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Tryphenia was in Pearlsburg for some reason when this house was being demolished.
50 years later.
50
Right,
years
nice
later.
little coincidence there.
I don't know if it's certainly possible that the mystery was so prevalent locally that somebody said, "Hey, we're demolishing a house. You want to come hang out?"
Yeah, probably not that.
But it's also possible that she just kind of was obsessed with the disappearance of her older brother and kind of hung out in
Or
that area.
it's possible actually that she wasn't there exactly when after it was discovered. Somebody actually notified her, and
That something
then
was
she
discovered,
came
and she
down
came-
and looked
yeah.
at it.
That's
always
probably the
possible.
more likely.
That's
I would
what
say
I'm
that's
thinking.
way more likely.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyhow, so she said she didn't think that skeleton was her brother's, although it was, 50 years on, so I don't really know how she would have known that.
Well, she said the brow wasn't nearly as high and pronounced.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when you look at a skull, it doesn't look like the head at which point, if you're not trained to know this.
It is extraordinarily hard for laymen to reconstruct
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
the muscular features of a face.
Yes, I
nose
appear
is
to have
always
a
all
giant
different.
forehead because I have no hair,
hair.
when in fact I don't actually have that big of a. I'm not a billboard brow.
Right.
No, you've got kind of a Neanderthal kind of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you
But
are.
I
You
don't
are
think-
talking about my
Yeah.
lineage appropriately.
To be honest with you, realistically, if I saw either of your skulls, I don't think I'd be able to be like, no, that's not Steve or Joe. No,
No.
definitely not. Especially 50 years later. It's one thing to say, like, as soon as you've got a skull, oh yeah, that's that skull, but it's been 50 years.
Yeah, that's why that kind of reconstruction is an art.
Yeah, it really is. To make matters worse, this house that was being demolished, the owner of this house was a mason named, I'm sorry, Joe, can you help me with this pronunciation?
Oh, Kiesewetter.
Kiesewetter. That sounds like an insult. And he bought the house in 1834 from a man named Christian Mertens, who in turn had inherited the house from his father, who had purchased the house in 1803.
So his dad did the deed. Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, it turns out Mertens Sr. had actually been a servant at
The White
Swan in 1809. And in spite of being a servant his entire life and living on servant wages, he had been able to offer dowries of 150 and 120 pounds, respectively,
Well,
for two of his daughters.
He didn't offer them, he settled them. In other words, he was in debt for those amounts.
He gave that amount of money
He promised
as dowries.
I took the settling part of this to mean that he had agreed to a dowry of X amount for each of his daughters, which equated to this 270-pound value, and he was making payments and then suddenly was able to pay it off. That's the way I interpreted
That could be.
this he had a debt of this amount and suddenly boop,
Interesting.
paid it off.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's a good way to interpret it. Either way, he came into a crap ton of money.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Because you have to remember, this is like, we're talking 1808, 1809 money.
I get that.
And I haven't
Yeah.
bothered to do the conversion.
270 pounds is decades worth of income.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
a lot.
yeah. It's a ton of money.
But I gotta wonder this: if you're the daughter whose dowry was 120 pounds, how does that make you feel?
Well, you're probably the younger daughter.
Oh yeah, less value there.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
that's
that
true. No,
doesn't
that's
make it
true.
sting any less.
Yeah.
No, it's accepted societal thing that,
Doesn't
like,
make it sting any less.
first daughters are worth more because they could, and I don't know about like German law, but typically, if you have no sons, this guy did have a son, but if you have no sons or the son becomes unable to inherit the property, the first daughter will inherit the property. So
Right.
she's worth more.
Ah.
And the second daughter might inherit the property if everything really goes wrong.
Yeah, unless the second daughter has got other attributes. that-
They don't really.
That doesn't factor
That
in.
doesn't really factor in so much, yeah.
Oh really? Oh, okay.
But it is, I mean, I think it's like the value is, this is like so archaic, but I think the value is it's the first daughter is like quote unquote worth more than the second daughter. You see that in Shakespeare a lot.
Please don't send us letters about
Yeah.
how sexist this is. We totally
We know.
We heard.
This
we
is
heard.
history. This
None
is the
of
way
us
it
are
works.
paying men to take our daughters off our hands.
No,
Don't worry.
no.
Don't worry. But it is pretty extraordinary that in 1809, somebody was suddenly able to be like, you know what? Actually, I have 270 pounds right here.
Yeah.
I want you to
Here it
clear
is.
those notes.
Yeah, no problem.
Not at all out of the question. You know,
Yeah.
these guys were in a position to observe him, and obviously they knew the area really
Yeah.
well. They could
Yeah.
have caught him and taken his stuff.
Yeah. And then an additional, like, nail in the coffin of this one is that it's reported that horse watcher guy, the Ostler, he apparently just, like, abandoned ship a couple days
He
after
just
Bathurst.
left town.
Yeah, he just disappeared a couple days after Bathurst disappeared. His name was Augustine Schmidt, and on November 27th, 1809, Bathurst's valuable fur coat was
The sable
discovered
coat.
hidden in an outhouse that was owned by a family that was named Schmidt.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How far away from the White Swan was the Schmidt property? I've never seen it described, so I'm asking.
Nothing was very far from anything in this town. It was all pretty local.
Okay, okay. So then the other thing to bring up, I'm going to talk about something in a second, but I also want to bring up the fact that all of the buildings in the area upon Bathurst's disappearance were scoured by the local authorities. So they had been
Apparently.
in, presumably, as much as they wanted to be, they had scoured the interior of said outhouse.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to, like, overlook an outhouse, though.
I don't know. I don't want to make that assumption. So
Right.
that's why I'm bringing
But it
it
was
up.
also, it was on the
It's,
27th of that year, so it was like 2 days after he disappeared.
Yeah.
So it could have been discovered in said scouring.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would leave it in the outhouse though, because the thing about it is even if the police choose not to search the outhouse when they're in search mode, they still have to go to the bathroom.
They still have to use the
Yeah,
outhouse.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it seems like not the best way. Because I've read other accounts that it was actually found in their house and not in their outhouse.
That's possible.
Again,
yeah.
you know, accounts
It's
vary.
hard.
And
Yeah.
so-
It seems like a better place for a sable. I wouldn't be keeping a sable in the outhouse.
My reason for asking the distance from the White Swan to the outhouse is that I questioned if maybe while going out to check the horses or check the shay, Bathurst was suddenly seized by a very
Inconvenient.
impressive need to find a place to
I don't think
take
it
a
was.
seat.
I don't think it
Yeah.
was that close.
Okay,
No,
that
it
was my
wasn't
question.
like adjacent to the property.
Okay, that's why I was asking. It's like, I'm going to take this off and stuff it here because I don't want to be wearing it while I'm doing it.
I don't think
okay.
so.
This is 1809. Usually you just crap in the street.
Well, okay, and I guess like to alleviate all of these fears, Schmidt's mother admitted to have taken the coat.
And she worked also
She
at the White
also
Swan, right?
worked at the White Swan.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, there were not very many places to work in this town.
Yeah.
It was the White Swan or the coffee house, and that's pretty much
Yeah,
it.
or the post house across
Yeah,
the road
yeah.
where the horses were.
So a woman who was employed at the coffee house said that after Bathurst had visited her establishment, you remember that he visited there to talk to the captain, that Augustine Schmidt had come in and said, "Hey, where'd that guy go?" And then hastened after him and, quote unquote, she supposed, taken some opportunity to destroy him.
Or maybe she just wanted to, like, collect on a bill or something.
Well, there were accounted for hours between when Bathurst disappeared and when Bathurst left the coffee house and when he disappeared. That he's accounted for.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like swiftly carried out whatever happened to Bathurst.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I want to point out about this whole, there was the skeleton found with the skull with the fractures on it, is this was one of 3 or 4 total that were discovered in the town over time. So it's not as if this is the only one.
No, but it is a nice.
I mean, it's an indication of the caliber of this town,
right.
but
And it is a nice, convenient little trail of, hey, these people actually worked there, and one of the guys was like, "Here's suddenly all this money." Right after Bathurst disappeared.
But that also makes it completely possible that 2 years prior, some other rich dude flouting his giant wad of cash got clubbed in the back of the head and stuffed under the stairs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it could have been anybody. I mean,
could have been.
Yeah, murder victims on your own property. I still don't get it. I've not said this before. I'm a big believer in taking them out to the woods or dropping them in a lake or something like that.
I mean, I guess I
That's a lot of
understand it.
Yeah.
I guess I understand it if you're planning on living there for a really long time and it's like in your house, like under the floorboard.
Which is what this
Yeah.
is what this was.
Yeah.
was under the kitchen.
Yeah.
It would still creep me out a bit.
Oh yeah, it's still really, really creepy, but it's safer there because you know you're going to be able to control. In 1809, you know you're going to be able to control someone like coming in and pulling up the floorboards in your house.
I don't think it's that creepy. For the era,
Yeah.
if you think about how common death is, I mean, to us,
Yeah,
like
back in the-
anybody
that's a good
dying
point,
around
yeah.
us is weird, but back in that day, people drop like flies all the time. Oh, I got a hangnail. Boom, dead.
Well, that's true. And actually, the people in 1809, they hadn't grown up on a steady diet of horror movies and stuff like that.
So it wasn't like they were
Yeah.
like, and then, read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just not normal.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's likely that he got hit over the head and
Oh, yeah.
robbed and then, dropped somewhere, and that a bunch of people in the town may have been complicit, together. That's either the amount of stuff that he had on him would have been enough to furnish a couple different families in the town a significant increase in income.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that makes me want to lean towards this is the dowry payments. The diamond pin is completely untraceable because diamonds can be pulled out of a setting, especially a diamond pin. It's not going to be a crazy big diamond.
Yeah.
The rest of it is clothing, which disintegrates over time and is not going to be kept long term, as in over multiple generations long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not as though like Dummy McGee over here is going to be like 2 weeks later, hey, look at this fancy coat I suddenly found. like,
Actually, I've
wearing it
seen
around.
that on the internet, but
Right, but we're much dumber than those people were.
that is true because
That's
we
what
have
I-
a series of tubes
Yeah.
that funnels idiocracy.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah. But yeah, actually, moving the diamond and the sable could have been done, just not locally. I mean, it goes to
Totally.
Berlin, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you could.
Which
do that
it
stuff.
turns out is not that far away.
Not really. No, not at all.
And you know what? Black markets are a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah, I like
It's
it.
also not, again, they don't have like a series of tubes. So, if you do it within a couple of weeks, it's not as though people are going to know that
Weeks,
this guy
months.
has disappeared. Yeah, probably even
it's
months.
easy to sit on. At that time, I mean, you think about it today. We know about a story for weeks or months, and then it lingers for years. At that time, you could literally sit on the spoils of your heist for a year.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to have any inclination, well, that's weird. It has BB embroidered in the lapel. Is that Benjamin Bathurst?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
So-
forgotten about it.
Let's move on
Oh yeah, let's do.
to the next set of theories. It's
Okay.
just one theory. I
Yeah.
think that was the only one that had a subset.
Thank God. 'Cause there's a lot of bullets.
And this theory is French abduction. J'accuse. Dum.
Oh,
So this French guy, he's a nobleman, and his name was Detroit, maybe?
D'Artagnan? Oh, wait, that's the wrong
No,
one.
that's the wrong one.
yeah.
He was an exiled French nobleman at the time. He was later exposed as a double agent.
Oh, those double agents.
Working for Napoleon, like as in like he had been faking being exiled, so he had been like a friend of the London, and then it turned out, oh, just kidding, Napoleon was actually his friend, and he was like feeding him information the whole
gathering
time.
the info,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whoops. He told Mrs. Bathurst in 1810 that her husband had been seized in the yard and spirited away from Perleberg by French cavalry, and then incarcerated in a fortress.
Yeah, that Magdeburg.
Yeah, and actually a variation of this theory appeared in a European magazine around the 1810 time, so pretty contemporary to his disappearance. But they added a detail that the troops had just passed by a similar place where Bathurst was, and that they had been instructed to go kidnap Bathurst because apparently he was carrying Austrian court papers. I don't know if that's true or not. He did have a considerable amount of unaccounted time
Well, that's
in
what I
his
was
travels.
thinking. Yeah.
Local opinion was that the French secret police had been actually chasing Bathurst, and that's kind of where his unaccounted for time went. He was trying to shake them. So like there was like a town that he passed through 25 miles southeast-ish, like on his trip from Berlin to Perlberg.
That's Kiertz.
Yeah, that apparently like the French police had kind of set their tracker on him at that point, and that the reason it took him so long to get from Berlin to Perlberg was that he had been like trying to shake them, kind of taking
a
these
roundabout
weird
zigzag
sporadic patterns, things like that. Apparently he had been snatched by some people, some French police sympathizers that were hiding in a house near Perlberg that was a French sympathizer.
Yeah. So the thing about it is the French actually taking him wouldn't be totally surprising because he took 10 days to get from Berlin to Perlberg.
Yeah.
Which suggests to me he was making a lot of side trips and doing some spying.
Yeah.
And they might have been like they wanted to find out what he knew, but most especially they wanted to keep him from getting back to England
with
the
knew.
information that he had.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest that is the biggest thing that makes no sense for me with this story. If you look at the Battle of Wagram, which is the 4th and the 5th of July, and the accountings always say, and then he was recalled to England. Okay, so let's presume that means somebody sent correspondence to him saying, you need to leave, stupid. Don't just stay there. Let's just pretend that he's staying because he thinks he has to do his duty. That would mean that correspondence saying the Battle of Wagram has happened, let's say it takes a month to get back to London, and then another month for that correspondence to get back. So that's July, August. This is now September that he's getting his correspondence. That still means that he should have been out of town much earlier than he was. It's I did the Google Earth thing here, and it's approximately 500 miles or 800 kilometers from Vienna to Perlberg.
513.
Okay, so approximate.
To Perlberg or to Berlin?
To Perlberg.
To Perlberg.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
as the crow flies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, actually, no. The one that I pulled, I actually
as
took this
roads
based
go,
off
right?
of roads, current
Yeah.
roads, which are actually going to be kind of reflective of paths because of topography, but not perfect. I get it.
They'll be a lot straighter and more,
But
less twisty.
my point here is that I did a couple of different things. I did research on how fast does a carriage travel in a day, and the average carriage could travel about 25 miles per day. So if it's 500 miles, that's 12 or 13 days. Or no, that's 20 days. Sorry. Should have taken him about 20 days
To get to Berlin.
to get to Perlberg.
Oh.
So he should have been there. If he was leaving in the beginning of September, he should have been past there long before he ever got there. But then if you also look at contemporary accounts of people's travel times who were traveling back and forth in that area, that trip actually only took about 12 days, give or take.
Wow.
So my giant question is, WTF, what was he doing in the area? Because it seems like he waited an odd amount of time to leave, and then it took an extremely long amount of time for him to make a commute, which others at the time had been making much quicker.
Let's just for a second.
Yeah.
I want to extrapolate that theory out to like modern day, right? I've driven across the country a couple of times. I've made treks that truckers make in like half the time that I make.
The people that I'm taking for the contemporaries were diplomats of the time.
Okay, but I don't think that Bathurst was like, he was wearing like really fancy clothes. And he didn't seem like the kind of guy who had about any kind of hustle in him. He was going to take his time.
He wasn't going to power through.
Yeah. But the other thing is he did wait so long that it's totally likely that there were like roadblocks or things that he had to like pause and pull off the street and hide from the armies. I agree with you. It took him way longer to leave and to get places than it should have.
And he was going through the Federation of the Rhine, which is not going to be happy to see an Englishman.
Right. So it's not unlikely that he was taking these weird circular routes around to get places, but I agree, especially once we start looking at the fact that it took him somehow 10 days to do 100 miles from Berlin.